What a pleasure it is to rise to speak. Thank you. It's indeed a pleasure to speak on the Electoral Administration Amendment Bill, sir. And it's nice to have the customary acclaim from the government on this matter. Sir, an electoral management body takes various forms around the world, and it's the body charged in a nation with administering the electoral process. Now, these bodies can take typically one of four forms. They can be independent, they can be mixed, they can be judicial, or they can be governmental. And it often happens that they carry out different functions depending on what model's adopted. And obviously in federated states there may be bodies that serve the federal jurisdiction and the states or provinces as well. And in jurisdictions where there are very large cities like the United States, New York with a population of 8.2 million, or Los Angeles County with just under 10 million, there are municipalities who have very specialised bodies to perform their electoral administration. And it is interesting, I think, to note in passing, sir, since we've just mentioned the New York example, that apparently the body that supervises the New York City administration of elections is a real model when it comes to looking at the adoption of new technology like the internet and continuous disclosure requirements and obligations, as far as, for example, donations. Now, Mr Williamson tells us that the internet's nearly outdated. No doubt he'll reveal what's going to come next. I look forward to saying, gee, Morris, do you remember the internet? 2.0. But let's consider the various models that could be adopted for an electoral management body. You've got the mixed model, where perhaps you might have an independent board for determining the policy to apply to elections, but where implementation of that policy can be a matter for the executive, with varying degrees of supervision by the independent board. And if we're looking for democracies that operate that model that have some relevance to New Zealand, we might look to France or to Germany, or if we wanted to look to our own Asia-Pacific region, Japan operates this model. Other Commonwealth countries include Jamaica, and of course Spain operates that mixed model, sir. Then you've got the possibility of the straight-out government model, where you have the Minister or the Secretary of State operating within the executive, directed by a cabinet minister. You've got the department itself conducting the election. And that's the sort of model that's adopted in countries like the United States, Denmark, Singapore, Sweden, Switzerland, and some other jurisdictions around the world. And then you've got the possibility of a judicial model. This is a model that's very much the vogue in Latin American countries, sir, because of the time at which they developed their constitutions. They thought that the way to go was to have elections closely supervised and ultimately responsible to an electoral court. And countries that operate that model include Argentina, Brazil and Mexico. And then you've got the independent model. Typically you have an electoral commission, independent, autonomous of the executive, has and manages its own budget. And interestingly, this is the model most operated in the jurisdiction that we like to compare ourselves most to, Australia. It's also the model in Canada, federally, India, South Africa, and again, interestingly, from the point of view of our region, a new country with a new constitution, it's the Timor-Leste model as well. And the South African constitution has indeed made permanent provision for this independent model, because the South Africans on independence decided that it was an extremely important point constitutionally to do that. So, sir, The New Zealand model is the classic mixed model, but it is a bit of a mishmash. It contains 5 different bodies. There's the Chief Electoral Officer, who happens to be a senior employee of the Ministry of Justice, but who's autonomous as far as the electoral function is concerned. And that person's responsible, sir, for the conduct of general elections, by-elections and referenda. And he or she employs returning officers for the 70 electorates and receives donations and election expenses from the parliamentary candidates and provides information to voters, candidates and parties relating to electoral events. So that's one of the 5 bodies currently charged with our electoral administration in New Zealand. Then you have the Electoral Commission, an independent Crown entity. The Commission has 4 functions. It has to register political parties, it has to allocate broadcasting funding, supervise financial declarations and conduct public education. So that's the second body. The Commission is fairly independent from the executive. The Commission has to be headed by a retired judge. The executive doesn't get an enormous amount of choice as to which retired judge is to be appointed. Generally speaking, the nomination tends to be that of the Chief Justice, and the Minister of Justice chooses from a relatively narrow range of people who can chair that body. Then the third body that has a role in our system at the moment, funnily enough, is the Chief Executive of a state-owned enterprise, New Zealand Post, because it's responsible, or that person is responsible via the Electoral Enrolment Centre to maintain the electoral rolls and conduct the Maori electoral option. So when one drills down into that, sir, one sees that, in fact, you've got a chief executive of a state-owned company conducting by contract with the Ministry of Justice this function as one of the outputs that the Minister requires of the Ministry, a very convoluted arrangement. And those are the 3 bodies that are mentioned in the explanatory note to the bill. But there are, of course, at least 2 other bodies that have a role in the system. There's the Representation Commission that draws the boundaries, often in overseas regimes. The Representation Commission is included within the structures that are required to organise and conduct elections. But you've also got the police, and I want to just speak a little bit about their function, because they are, sir, the enforcement body as far as our electoral law is concerned. And one of the things that this bill, while we support it being read a first time, doesn't do is address the issue of the enforcement machinery when there is a breach of electoral law. And I'd like to suggest that that might be something the Select Committee would want to have a look at, because the problem that the police always have, of course, is that electoral offences never go to the top of the queue. The police are always going to be concerned with crimes against the person and dealing particularly with violent crime. They're never going to be able to prioritise electoral matters, and nor, sir, necessarily will they have the forensic expertise to do so. These days, these questions involve the sort of skills in dealing with tracking donations, dealing with financial disclosures and what have you, that actually require quite sophisticated levels of skill that are probably more properly found in organisations like the Serious Fraud Office rather than the police. It might well be, sir, that with the forensic skills that are required, it would be useful to think about having under this new independent Crown entity an enforcement function rather than having the police responsible for that, if we truly are interested in bringing all the functions together in an expert body that has the resources and the time to deal with the questions before it. The final point that I wanted to make, sir, is that if one has a look at the explanatory note, one sees that one of the options canvassed was an Office of Parliament for this function. Personally, I think, sir, that would have been the most compelling option to have gone for. The note suggests that there just wasn't time to get that sort of apparatus going before the next election. But, sir, if we really do want a truly independent body charged with the conduct of elections in an honest and serious way, then given the conduct of our other offices of Parliament, in which we have enormous faith, that seems to me to be the way to go. Thank you, sir.
I call Paul Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.